Welcome to The Bone, the podcast that goes deeper. Here we cut through the noise and get straight to the core of the issues that matter. From real stories to raw truths, we dive deep into the conversations that shape our world and challenge our thinking. We're not afraid to dig in and get to the marrow of it all. Whether it's life, culture, or business in sports medicine, we're here to break it down raw and real. No filters, no fluff, just to the bone. With your host, Shelby Daly, we're getting to the bone. This is a clinically pressed, approved CEU podcast. Find the quiz to gain credit at clinicallypressed.org/courses. Clinically Pressed Company, making the complicated simple through results that give back. Find out more at clinicallypressed.org. Let's get started. Welcome back. This is To the Bone, a podcast by Shelby Daly to discuss all things athletic training. Today, Shelby is joined by Andre Gonzalez ATC to discuss servant leadership, an approach to employment turnover and retention. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Shelby.
Hi, everybody. We're back with Andre Gonzalez. We both were in the FIU program, not at the same time, but Andre did a great presentation on leadership at the residency this summer, and I really wanted to have him on to talk about the subject of leadership and how important it is to athletic training. So Andy's background, he is the Florida man. He can't seem to get away. But he has wandered out of the state a few times to Tennessee and Maryland, and currently he's back in Florida. He just recently graduated from FIU's DAT program and is currently an associate athletic trainer of Athletic Training Services. So what is the draw to go back to Florida?
I when I lived in Maryland, it was a little too cold for my liking, even though I loved all the monuments and the museums and all that stuff. And so then I went to Tennessee for a little bit and I really enjoyed it, but then I kind of got homesick. And here I am. I've been back about, I think, 6 years now. So
Okay.
it's been good.
Yeah, you must have a nice tan.
Yes, tan and family. I have most of my families here. I have a family member in New York, but I was like, New York's too cold. So I wanted the warmth again.
Well, yeah, Randy's up in Alaska, and it sounded like there was the starting of snow coming. Winter is coming, I guess.
It's beautiful and sunny outside. So if I'd moved the camera so you could see it, it's like blue skies, little poofy white clouds. It's just beautiful. It's got a little bit of a bite in the wind. And then you look out the back windows at the trees. We have trees behind the house. And it's like, what is that stuff falling off the tree? Leaves falling off the trees! Ah! So now I got to remember where I put the rake and, that whole piece of things. See, and that's the other thing. We may have to get an interpreter for the guy from Florida because trees have these little photosynthesis generators, and in the cold, they fall off.
Yeah, no, here in Florida, like I said, if Florida has, everywhere else in the country typically has the 4 seasons. Here, it's basically too wet and dry. So dry meaning
It's still
hot as
hot.
hot, and then wet where it's hurricane season and it doesn't stop raining. You could put it to your clock around between 2 and 5. You're expecting a thunderstorm somewhere in Florida for sure.
But so my Shelby's, let's see, that would be her grandparents, great-grandparents were actually down in Naples before Naples was cool. And so we would get to go down every once in a while. I think one I can really remember, we went down for Christmas. And so here's this kid from Alaska wandering around the trailer park in Naples, Florida, going, why do they have tinsel on palm trees? And is it December? Because I'm wearing Speedos. I'm just really confused right now. So I love Florida. I just not in the right head.
Florida's an interesting place, to say the least.
Well, with the range of weather, I'm sure, athletic training wise, it is definitely difficult to manage the weather down there, right?
Listen, there's times where I know as an AT, I've prayed, please don't be a rain delay. Please don't be a rain delay for my game. And then there's practices where I'm like, please rain so we can cancel. Please rain so we can cancel. And I still haven't figured out the right, dance and song or hymn or whatever that I need to do to get those dreams to become reality. But I'm sure I'm not the only Floridian AT that has thought of that, at least.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, see, that's one of the beautiful things about being an AT in Alaska or being in athletics in Alaska. It's, it's like, oh, does it hurt? Well, just roll over on the ice. It's right there. Well, I'm not going to bring ice out to put on your knee. Just roll over and stick yeah, there you go. That's good. So, it's a convenience thing.
Yeah.
That is pretty convenient.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to athletic training, though, what is it that, I mean, and actually both of you can answer this. What is it that's the favorite thing about being an AT?
I'll go first. I mean, for me, like when I got into it, I had a passion for sports and medicine, so I wanted to combine the both. And I was actually a nursing major before I got into athletic training. And I remember telling one of the nursing professors, "How can I be a nurse for sports?" And they were like, "That doesn't exist." And I was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Well, that kind of sucks." But I started doing some research and I found out about athletic training. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Being on the sidelines, being in the game atmosphere. But, to answer your question, when I found out about athletic training, the idea of being able to help people get back to what they love to do, to whether it's, competitive hockey, because it's so popular here in Florida, as you probably can imagine, or just even the weekend warrior who just enjoys disc golf or whatever the case may be. It kind of brought pride to my work, and I said, you know what, I want to get them back to what what they love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how about you, Shelby? What was the big? You've been at it a while now. So what is it that you like about being an AT?
Well, I mean, not to get gushy, but I think you were one of the inspiring factors.
What? Because I hurt myself a lot?
Well, you were young back then.
Oh, that ship has sailed. He's just old and crinkly now.
Well, I always like the performance aspect because I know that you did your background a lot when I was playing soccer of, well, how do I make my daughter better and what can I provide her? Which I think was kind of the spark of where I got my inspiration to try to be in the performance aspect, which medicine I think is the best way to enhance your performance. So that's where I kind of got it from, other than you
Nice.
making me do push-ups when I got in trouble,
At least you didn't cry. I made your cousin cry when I coached her in swimming. Andre, I'm a bad man. It's terrible. Terrible.
No,
Well,
that's
so now one of the things about To the Bone that's kind of we think the reason we're doing this is it lets us touch on all the things that touch athletic training. And so one of those things that obviously is a concern to everybody who is in an employment situation is how do you get good talent? And then once you've got it, how do you keep it? And apparently, Andre, you've been looking into this in some depth. And so that's the basis for today is servant leadership.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
servant leadership for retention. Go, man. You got time. Go for it. Just start talking.
So it's funny enough. When I started looking at different DATs, I was in a juncture in my career, and I'm 11 years in now as a certified athletic trainer. And I had really good friends that went through the program with me, and they, a lot of them were deciding to step away from the profession that they once loved, that they once had a passion for. And I was really like dumbfounded. How do you go to school for so long, do the hours, do all the training and work in it, and then once you're in it, you kind of lose that passion. And they were great clinicians, and I was frustrated with that. And when I started the DAT at FIU, I remember having a meeting with the program director, Dr. Jeff Conan, and he asked me, well, if you do this program, what's your why? And I said, I want to be the one to find an answer to how do we keep good clinicians? Why, and on top of that, find out why are we losing good clinicians? And that became the basis and the foundation to my capstone project, and becoming a content expert of retention and identifying turnover factors within the profession. So my 2 years in the program, I kept researching and reading peer-reviewed articles, and so much was already published on why athletic trainers were leaving,
Hmm.
why, in different settings, particularly the high school and the collegiate setting. And, immediately, kind of like everybody else, I was like, oh, the money. It has to be the money. That's why people are leaving. And I found out that money wasn't the root cause of everything.
Hmm.
Different things like schedules, travel demands, the lack of administration support, the lack or the work life conflict with families not supportive of the clinician. Pay was another one, obviously, but there was other things and factors contributing to the strain that these clinicians were having and making the ultimate decision. Okay, do I stay or do I go? On top of that, I also at the time thought, well, there must be a shortage of athletic trainers. And the reality is that in the last, I'll say 12 years, there's been an influx or an increase of athletic trainers in the 10-year span from 2011 to 2021. There was over 10,000 athletic trainers newly certified in the profession, which
Hmm.
meant there is no shortage. There's actually an influx. So what is it that's causing these people to leave? So when I found out those different factors, I said, okay, what are some of the factors that leaders can maybe affect? Pay, potentially that's one. But again, there's other six factors that a leader, I think, can truly contribute and cause a change to try to
Well,
maintain or retain that employee.
but wouldn't that be management's job? Isn't that what management is supposed to do when it comes to athletic training?
You would think management would do that, but there's a difference between leadership and management. So
Oh,
when we think about leadership, we think about leadership being a person of having a mindset to cause influence, to cause change, to cause the team and themselves to reach and obtain a certain goal. Management looks at the way a team or someone can do it efficiently or reach the goal. So think of it this way: a leader has to think of what's the next step, versus a management has to think of, okay, think of a staffing an event or a schedule, right?
hmm.
How does that person manage to staff an event with the limited resources that they currently have? That's
Hmm.
more of the management. Think of possibly like logistics. Leadership, on the other hand, is a dynamic way of thinking. Okay, this person I have that works under me, I need to help guide them to reach a goal or an
Hmm.
objective. The question becomes, is that goal personal to that person? Is it the goal related to the team that they work in, or is it related to the organization within itself?
Now, Shelby, you've had firsthand experience with this, with the International Jiu-Jitsu organization that you helped put together uh, events for. So you're tasked with providing all of Andre's people, uh, athletic trainers, folks on the mats. I mean, I'm always amazed the number of people that you have to pull in, and you pull them from like all over the place. So that would be, in your example, Andre, the management side of it. Is it? Do you feel like you're managing or leading in that role, Shelby?
Well, I think it's more of the management portion of it. Is we're just putting in the safety nets to make sure everybody understands what we're all doing and how we work together most efficiently. So it's a lot of
Mhm.
policies and procedures, putting out the plan, making sure that we're prepared for anything that can go wrong. But with that leadership portion of it, it is being able to pivot on the minute kind of thing. So, while we were in Las Vegas for Jiu Jitsu Con, we had an ambulance there and we thought that they were capable of, taking care of the situations when we activated them. Turns out the staff changed every day. We didn't necessarily do the due diligence of making sure that we all had the same plan each day, because I thought from being from the same company, they would all have the same procedure. Obviously not. So, I had a girl with a dislocated elbow, posterior medial, and it was stuck. We couldn't get it reduced. And so they decided to come in, do their evaluation after our evaluation. They kind of dilly dallied in calling the ambulance. And, it took her 45 minutes to get her into the ambulance with
Hmm.
that much pain. And, the next one we had was, what was it? A bilateral patellar tendon rupture. So I just kind of, I texted him, let him know what I was doing, and literally called the ambulance because I was like, I don't think, I don't really want to wait that long because, this guy can't move at all. So it's, stepping into that leadership and making a decision on the dot, or, unhappy athletic trainers that, we got to figure out, it's making them happy is what it is as a leader, is how can I make sure they're thriving and being able to do the job that I've hired them to do. So if I have to sacrifice something, I'll make it happen.
And that goes to where Andre's coming from, because there's like different flavors when it comes to, there's different flavors in management too. But Andre, tell us about the different styles of leadership, if you were.
Definitely, but I just want to touch on something before I get there. Shelby said something about making sure that they're happy, and as a leader, sometimes that's very difficult to do. But I think as leaders, it's our responsibility that we take into account their well-being, right? To make sure that they have the resources to do their job that they've been hired to do. So I think that's something important that you brought up, Shelby, that is very key on leadership. If you Google search leadership, you'll get different scholars saying, "Oh, there's four main ones, there's five main ones, there's 1,000 main ones." But when I was in the DAT, we had to read an article that Dr. Conan had provided for us about leadership styles, and some of the ones that stuck out were like the bureaucratic leadership, where the bureaucratic leadership is more of a, how do you say, a chain of command leadership style. There's also the democratic leadership style, where that one kind of focuses more on a leader including their teams and participation to make the decision. There's also the authoritarian or autocratic leadership, where it's kind of the person in charge makes the final decision, no ifs, ands, or buts. The laissez-faire leadership, which is more of a hands-off approach to leadership. And then the other one was the transformational leadership, which this is the leader that is pretty popular, that most leaders are motivating their staff and encouraging and hoping that they aspire to reach the organizational goals, which, if you think about it, and we'll talk more later, I'm sure, about comparing that with servant leadership, how can that be manipulated? You think, okay, I'm going to motivate my staff to reach the organizational goals, but at what point do we account for our staff and their goals, their personal goals? How does that add up to that?
What is the most interesting thing that you've learned about leadership after studying those various facets of leadership or styles?
For me, the interesting thing was they all seem pretty one-sided almost. It didn't allow a lot of room for connection between the leader or the leadership and their team members. So it kind of trickled down for a lot of it. The only one that kind of gave that I saw from, what I read is the democratic leadership, where yes, give me the input, give me some feedback, but at the end of the day, it's more of a one-sided relationship.
Now, from those styles of leadership, this
Mhm.
leads us into the servant leadership.
Yes.
How did you find out about servant leadership, and what led you to dive deeper into that thought process?
So servant leadership, I came across it. I was doing research to see what other disciplines in medicine, such as nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, physicians, what were they using or doing to try to mitigate the turnover rate within their profession. And in one of the articles, they mentioned servant leadership, and I was like, that's interesting. I haven't seen that style of leadership. And so, I started digging into it a little deeper, and I was really intrigued because this style or this methodology or thought process is of selflessness. It's not about the leader at any point with servant leadership. It's about the team, and it's about serving that team.
Okay, so Shelby, how do you see that servant leadership model expressing itself in athletic training?
Well, I think what I saw the most, at least with some of my previous employers, was I wanted to grow. I wanted to add to the betterment of the department, and it seemed like I kind of got chokeholded or cornered. Like you're kind of doing a little bit too much there. Like you're being a little threatening, I think. And it was, I thought I was doing my due diligence of, going out and educating myself more and to provide better services to the athletes and at least be able to answer their questions on the new fads or the new types of treatments and all that stuff. I finally had gotten to the level of I think I needed business classes. We were doing all right with the athlete facing portion of clinic, but then the back side, the administrative tasks were very messy and a lot of people didn't know what they were doing. So it was, okay, if we keep going over budget each year, like what are we doing wrong? Like what are we not doing logistically to help protect that? So, it was trying to find different ways to help my department. And I felt like, I kept hitting the wall on trying to show that it was good intentions of me trying to go out. And I didn't really feel supported, which ultimately kind of pushed me out of the system of there. Or maybe, it was a very stressful time ultimately because people weren't understanding where I was coming from.
So you pursued that business through University of Alaska Anchorage. You took some entrepreneurial courses there, right? Did those ended up, do you feel, helping? Or is that why you're still searching for a model like Andre's bringing to the table?
Well, I mean, I think they gave great basics on how does a business work, and which I was kind of looking towards. But obviously, I have bigger aspirations of bettering the profession as a whole and bringing more opportunities to athletic trainers through possible business ventures that I am exploring. So it was, okay, great. I'm getting the actual logistics of a business, but then I didn't really have anybody there not necessarily holding my hand, but helping me guide putting it all together to be actually creating a business sort of thing. So, and that's how I find the FIU program ultimately is, they understand athletic training, sports medicine, healthcare, and, luckily I have those building blocks from the business program to implement into this FIU doctorate program. So, I mean, I'm only 2 semesters in. We'll see what comes out at the end, but at least they're providing that guidance at the end of the day.
Well, so we'll jump back over to Andre. He finished it. He's the boss now. What is the framework that servant leadership is built on or hung on?
So servant leadership, it's a thought process, and everybody tries to say it's a leadership style, but it's really not. It's just a character and ethics standpoint where as a leader, you don't want to necessarily lead first, but you have the natural urge to want to serve first. And through serving, you aspire to become a leader. It's very different from just saying, I'm going to be a leader and I'm going to be a servant leader as soon as I do it. It's a little different. So again, that urge that you want to help guide your staff, help them achieve their goals. Whatever is important to them is what you're trying to help them accomplish versus the idea that you have your own agenda and you want to implement your agenda on them.
Okay. So where did this come from? You're a bright guy. Did you come up with all this on your own, or is this something that you're fleshing out?
Listen, I wish I could take credit for this because I'll be a multi-billionaire by now, but it was not me.
I get you a book deal. Let me tell you.
Like I said earlier, I was researching some stuff. So when I found out about servant leadership, I wanted to look up the origin, who came up with this idea. So a gentleman by the name of Robert K. Greenleaf coined the term in the 70s, and he came up with this after reading a book called Journey to the East, where it's about a spiritual pilgrimage of men that decide to go on this journey. And it surrounds the story about a character in the book named Leo. And Leo to these men is a servant. That's his role. In the book, the servant is talked about as somebody who keeps up their lifting their spirits, the person who does the mediocre chores for them, the person who basically keeps them going. They're like their hype man, right? So because of this, that band of men continue the journey until one day he kind of disappears. Leo is nowhere to be found. And the men kind of fall away and kind of lose track, and well, where's the focus? Then why continue the journey? And they discontinue their journey. So, Robert K. Greenleaf, he worked for 40 years as an AT&T leader or manager in different settings or different levels. He did 40 years, and after reading the book, he goes, well, that sounds, a title that most people won't relate to leadership, a servant. He coined a term to say, well, what is it that we can do as individuals to want to serve? So that's where the origin came. He published 3 essays in the 70s where he talked about this methodology or this mindset about servant leadership.
Well, so we there's a lot of management books out there, and everybody has an opinion on it. And I've had the opportunity in the past to interview some of these folks who are, some of the name brand, the 1 minute manager guys, and the guys who did get the book deal and turned out good for them. And quite often they'll talk about transformational leadership. How is servant leadership different from transformational leadership?
That's a great question. They're very similar because, again, you think of Leo, right? And I said he was their hype person. He wanted them to do well on this journey. So when you think of transformational leadership, the leader in that style tends to want to inspire and motivate their employees to obtain the goals of the organization. When you compare it to servant leadership, the key difference is that the leader is hoping and trying to hype up or motivate and inspire the individuals of their team to reach their personal goals, not necessarily those of the organization. And if you think of it in a hierarchical way, you think a servant leadership serves their staff first, then the organization, and then themselves last. And through this, you hope that these individuals that are working for the organization and for your team are bought into what you're selling and build into the framework of the organization and want to contribute back to the organization. That's the biggest key difference between the two. Because with transformational leadership, the issue becomes sometimes that if there's an ethical component with transformational leadership where I can, as a leader, or potentially, I don't want to say I can't, but as a leader, if you see that your team isn't striving for that organizational goal, where I can kind of coerce them or I can bribe them to, come on, let's do it because, hey, we do this, the organization's going to give us this in return. And although some people on the team may be like, well, that sounds great, others may be like, well, that's not what I'm here for, or that I'm not bought into that goal, or I'm not bought into that ideology, and that doesn't really benefit that person in growth.
All right. So to recap, transformational, you have the primary focus being the organization, and then secondary focus, the personal growth of the individuals involved in the organization.
Correct.
But if we move to the servant role or the servant leadership model, the primary focus is the follower's needs, number one, followed by organization and themselves.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Check out clinicallypressed.org/courses for access to free CEUs for athletic trainers. Register and enroll in as many CEUs as you'd like. New CEUs coming on a monthly basis, including from your host of To the Bone with Shelby Daly. Get ahead of your CEUs by listening to podcasts and getting credit for it. Clinically Pressed Company, making complicated simple through results that give back. Find out more at clinicallypressed.org.
Getting back to it, this is To the Bone. It is a podcast on athletic training and the things that touch on athletic training. And today we're visiting with Andre Gonzalez, who is a proponent of the servant leadership model for retention, for keeping good employees and retaining staff. So to dive back into that, we had just talked about the differences between transformational and servant. If we get back into it, what makes someone good at servant leadership? If we, all of us have been trained by all of the old management styles. Now we have this schism, and we're moving into a different style of leadership. What makes a good servant leader? What are the characteristics?
So there's so many characteristics, and again, since Mr. Greenleaf, there's been countless reiterations of his work, and they all share common terminology. So someone who's inspiring, someone who's trustworthy, someone who is, I think the biggest one, genuine with their staff members. I think that's one that's kind of overlooked. Someone who is selfless, and you see a lot of these terms thrown around. And if you put it in a bubble, I think the biggest two terms out of it is someone who is selfless and genuine with staff. I think that's something that tends to be overlooked in our profession, from different perspectives, from the perspective of colleagues who are leaders and colleagues who aren't leaders, from students who are seeing their preceptors and they're kind of like, well, you act one way when you're in front of these people, but then you kind of act a different way when your boss is here. So I think those are, if I had to give you the biggest two key terms or characteristics of a good servant leader, just to kind of make it quick and easy, someone who's selfless and I lost my train of thought. Someone who's selfless and genuine. There we go.
Selfless and genuine. Okay, so I got my pencil. I'm making notes here. I'm just saying. I'm making notes here. So I'm going to check up on you when I'm in Florida next time, because I've been to Fort Lauderdale. I usually set up my aid table right there at Bubba Gump Shrimp, and so I'm ready. If anybody in a bikini falls off their bicycle on the sidewalk, I am ready to respond. I just wish. I just wish I'd see less old guys on bicycles and Speedos and more of the young. But that's my bias. That's my bias. So genuineness, and then how is that applicable, and why is that important to athletic training? I mean, come on, throw some ice on it, wrap that sucker up, get back in there. Here's some Motrin, we're good to go.
So I think too, you asked me earlier what's one of the reasons I love athletic training, or what's some of the reasons, and I think relationships are key, right? And I think leadership sometimes has this demeanor or this look of, oh, that's the boss. Don't be like, you gotta hide things from them, and it shouldn't be that way, in my opinion, at least. And I think through servant leadership, I think that opens the canvas for open dialogue, open communication, to demonstrate as a leader that you value that person. You're trying to get to know that person, and if you genuinely care, most times than not, you want them to be successful. You want them to succeed. You want them to be a good representation of your team, of your organization, of them themselves as a professional and just as a human being. Mm-hmm. So there's different things that I think leaders can do, and I'll say this too. Earlier I mentioned a few reasons why athletic trainers have decided to not necessarily turn over the profession, but just leave certain settings compared to others. Mm-hmm. And I think a big part of that is too, in which there's other things that leaders can affect. I mentioned earlier work climate. I mentioned earlier schedule. I mentioned earlier, yes, pay is a big caveat and the big elephant in the room that everybody can see. But if there's certain things you can affect, let's say you in your current role as a leader cannot directly affect pay, then affect other areas. Work climate and administration support. Those are big factors that leaders can make an impact on. I've always heard the saying, and I'm a testament to it. I could get paid X amount of money, but if the work environment isn't conducive to my growth or me as a person, then I'm going to be miserable working there. I don't want to work there, no matter how good the money may be. So
I totally get it.
And I've worked in other places where I've loved the leadership. The pay wasn't great, but I loved the leadership that was there because they were genuine, they were compassionate, they cared about their staff, and they did everything possible. I can give you a perfect example. I've heard of stories of athletic trainers who, because of their work, were told you can't go to your cousin's wedding in 2 months.
Ouch.
Or there's a Hall of Famer who shares a story because of his job missed the birth of, I think it was one or two of his kids
Mm-hmm.
because he was in season.
Mm.
And you hear that and you're like, well, why work there? Like, they don't value you as an individual, let
Mm-hmm.
alone what you value.
Yeah.
So why even bother? So I think through servant leadership, you connect with the employee, you connect with the team members, you find out who they are as a person, and you start investing into what they invest in. And I think that builds the bridge or builds the gap of servant leadership. I think
Well,
that's something that's really important.
and I think if we look, we throw a net out there and start looking for examples of that. Because, when we're having a bad day, it's easy to come up with examples of, oh, well, this is why this thing's terrible and da, da, da. But if
Hmm.
we look at what you're talking about, I'm betting that if we checked Mother Teresa's income statement, she was not knocking down the big bucks. I think she was probably underpaid. Just an opinion, but she was passionate about what she did. She built an entire order because she exemplified those types of traits. People, she was honest. She had a vision. Her people trusted her. The people
Yep.
she cared for trusted her. So I'm not recommending that you go to a third world country and start athletic training in the ghetto. But if we look at leadership examples, there's one that says that debunks it has to be about the money or it has to be about the retirement. We
Yep.
fight that battle constantly in the state of Alaska with retention, or like, oh, you have to have a defined benefit pension. It's like, no, you're going to lose people in the first 5 years because they're figuring out where they want to live.
Hmm.
What you got to figure out is when they decide that this is where they want to live, how do we keep those? So I think you've got some very good points going forward here.
And funny enough, when you Google search servant leaders, you get Mother Teresa as one of the top ones that come out. Mother
You cheated.
Teresa.
I didn't cheat. I did not do that.
Mother
So,
Teresa, Martin Luther King, just to name a few, and those are big names. And again, you think about their careers and their lives, and you're like, well, did they get paid a lot? Probably not. But because they valued people, because they valued what they were doing and they were passionate about it, they found happiness in that. They found that they can inspire others to do the same. Because again, it's not always about the money. Environment has a big proponent of happiness for job satisfaction with multiple entities or multiple disciplines in healthcare. And if that's down the drain, then people are going to leave no matter how well you pay them.
right.
Well, and I think it's building the team culture too. If you can really
Hmm.
bring out the individual and their strengths and what's going to light the fire under their butt to keep working hard, that gets more buy-in to the program or the department. And then everybody understands what motivates each person. I think a lot of assistant athletic trainers, there's the clicks and stuff is because they understand each other and they understand what
Hmm.
motivates them, what might tick them off. They've already figured that out. But if you have a central person as a leader actually pulling it out from each person, I think it creates a bigger team and more cohesion to be able to support each other. It's pulling together and supporting somebody who needs to go to a funeral or a wedding or something. Like, you're more willing to put it up because you're going to get it back from somebody else. And I think
Yep,
that's how servant leadership really pulls together, the group mentality, which I think is lacking sometimes.
definitely. And I second that, Shelby. Like, it's crazy to me how many times, I've worked in places, and again, it's kind of like, well, your team's off. You still need to come do rehabs and things like that. And you compare it to other institutions where, hey, your team's off. Leave us a little list of who might be coming in, so and you take the day off as well.
Yeah.
You know, and especially in the collegiate setting, in the high school setting, I can only imagine it's a lot tougher to do such a thing because most high schools have only one athletic trainer,
Mm-hmm.
unless they're private and they have a lot of money and they can afford more than one. Then fantastic. Then you can work it out with that person. But going back to what you're saying is, if somebody, if an employer, a leader specifically, is willing to vouch for me and my values and my beliefs and, have my back, I'm gonna feel indebted to them at some level as a human being, and say, you know what, I gotta have their back too. You
Mhm.
know,
And I think that's
because
kind of the missing link between, the athletic training department and administration too. Not that we need to bend over backwards with the servitude, but that understanding of, well, what does the department need from the athletic trainers, and, you know, showcasing the proper way to deal with things, which I think we do most of the time, but
yep.
it's that extra step of uh, creating that bridge so that they understand, yeah, maybe if we have to change practice within 24 hours, maybe we'll let the athletic trainer know, but maybe we tell them, well, we're going to alter it so you don't need to be there.
hmm
I think it's building those relationships so a step further than just in the athletic training department.
I was at one institution, and I won't say their name, but I remember the athletic trainers had to cover study hall, and I was like, "You're kidding me?" And they're like, "No, in case some." I said paper cut. That's the only thing I could think of, and I was like, "Come on, really? Like study hall?" I haven't been in college athletics for the past 3 4 years, but study hall was a coverage for the
I,
AT.
I saw that. That's a Gecko commercial. I think I've seen that. The guy pulls a hammy in his finger catching a
Oh,
phone or
yeah.
something. Yeah. I didn't know the lizard was an AT, but so how does it start? What is a simple phrase that you can start with to implement this type of servant leadership? What would be the three word answer to getting this implementation to start without going to a weekend training seminar?
So 3 words to kind of break servant leadership. I think you got to be compassionate is one, adaptable and selfless. Those
All
are the
right.
big 3 words I could think of when you think about servant leadership. You have to have compassion to just people, to human beings. Athletic training is not for the faint-hearted. It's a tough career. I don't care if you work in the college setting, in the pro setting, in a clinic. They all have their goods and bads, and they all have their tough days. They all have their easy days, which sometimes don't seem that easy when you look at the big picture. But just understand that when you get into a leadership role, because of time, because of you've earned it, or just because of whatever the case may be, just understand that you were a person on the ground doing the grunt work at one time. Don't forget what you went through, and use the experiences of, man, I was run through the ground. Yes, I'm a great AT, but I think there's another way we can accomplish that. I don't think you have to force what was forced on you in a negative light to others. Be compassionate to your fellow AT, especially the newer ones that are coming up. Um, just because you were run through the mud, you don't have to do that to your new subordinates or your team members, just to say, look, I went through it, you got to go through it too. That's not compassionate at all.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
I think if we had a nickel for every time we asked it is, are you okay? Or how are you? I think that's a big way to do
and
it.
definitely, and again, it's not just to check off something. Okay, hey, I asked how are they, and they said they're okay. You know, we're smarter and we're more educated than just understanding. If someone says I'm okay, oh, okay, cool, now go do this job. That's not, well, thanks for nothing. And again, sometimes people aren't open. Sometimes people aren't willing to share whatever troubles they may be going through, whether it's at work or personal life. But get to know the person. I can't tell you, I've had, even before I was an athletic trainer, I worked at a hospital system, and the leader at the time, who I was like almost equal level to the custodial staff, not to say anything bad about custodial staff
Mm-hmm.
anywhere, because that's a tough job, but I remember working, and she was like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, she goes, "No, no, wait, time out. Are you okay?" And that kind of like made me stop in my tracks. And I said, "Look, I've been working 10 hours. I haven't had lunch." She goes, "What do you got?" And she took the initiative, and she goes, I care for you. She took the paperwork out of my hands, and she said, "We'll figure this out. You need to go grab a bite to eat, say 15, 30 minutes, whatever the case is." And I was like, wow, that. And I was like, no, no, no. And I fought her on it. And she was like, no, no, you're going to eat. Because if you faint, then I have a lot of paperwork to do. But
She
things like that, it's kind of like, be genuine, care about the person, be compassionate.
She was looking out for Andre. She was looking out for herself. She knows what happens when you get hangry.
If I didn't know her character, I would say
Oh,
yes, you're right.
okay, all right. There
But
we
her
go.
character spoke volumes, and it wasn't
Outstanding.
just with me; it was with just everybody across, the department. And she was an upper level manager. She was middle management, if you want to use those phrases. But
Mm-hmm.
the other word I said was adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
Things change when you
Oh yeah.
hire somebody. I think we do a disservice in our profession that we interview people and we're like, well, what are your goals? Well, my goals are I want to get certified in XYZ and I want to work XYZ in the future. Okay, fantastic. But people that stay 2, 3 years, things happen, things change.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the same person that we were a year ago. We're not the same person 2, 3, 5 years ago. As time goes on, things happen to us in our personal lives that causes us to change our mindset, causes us to change our needs and our values and what we want. So I think it's our jobs as leaders to do our due diligence to check in on our staff and say, hey, how's so and so? Oh, well, I'm not interested in that anymore. Or hey, I'm going through this and it changed my mind completely. Or you know what? I'm thinking I need to approach this a different way. And that's fine. But as a leader, we need to be aware of these changes because if we're not, we're playing with the old playbook when that's the fifth version away from the original or from what it is today.
Yeah.
And
So,
then the last word I'll say is selfless, right?
mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how often, I've been selfless in my career, and I'm sure Shelby can share the same, and other athletic trainers where you're trying to do your due diligence for somebody, whether it's a patient or something, and because of your selflessness and your effort and your commitment to them, that they want to give you back the world. They want to give you grace. They want to give you, I missed a diagnosis once with a patient and I felt horrible. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my license. He's gonna sue me. And I said, that's it. I need to start looking at school again. And it wasn't a catastrophic thing, but I felt very guilty. And
Mm-hmm.
the patient told me, hey, I know you had in my best interest. It wasn't done intentional. It wasn't done this. It wasn't done
Mm-hmm.
that. And I was like, again, I'm so sorry. Like, please tell me what I need to do. And
Well, so
but
on
yeah.
that note, looking forward, what are
Mhm.
you most excited about as an AT? What do you see coming up that gets you excited about being in the profession?
Oh man, selfishly and biasly speaking, I'll say, I think there's a turn in our profession with this next generation of ATs, and I think things are gonna have to change in cultures. I think there's a lot of culture changes that are gonna occur. Um, this new AT profession or these new AT professionals coming out understand the value and appreciate the value of work-life balance. And I think organizations are going to have to find a way to submit to that ideology of, okay, I can't have this person work 97 hours a week, even if that's possible. I have to kind
Mm-hmm.
of give them a little something because I'm not going to be able to keep them. You
Right.
know, I think that's going to also affect pay. I think that's also going to affect benefits. I think that's going to be a catalyst in our profession sooner than later, because the NATA published, I want to say December of 23 or November or June, I can't remember exactly, but this white paper talking about how there's jobs, and there's athletic trainers, but people are not applying for those jobs
Hmm.
because of X amount of reasons. And they even talked about the interview process, and it was brought up again in December of the NATA news. And it's been talked about since the 90s. This is not a new topic about retention
Well,
and turnover in our profession. So I think we're coming to a point where things are going to change drastically. So
well,
I'm excited about that.
you were saying servant leadership was coined in the 70s. So 70 to 2, that's 30 years plus 20. It only took a half century for it to catch on. So timeline, you're way ahead of the deal.
So yeah, so I'm excited about that for sure. I
All right.
think and I'm curious to see, how I play a role in that as
Hmm.
an advocate for our profession. I'm gung ho on that for sure.
Outstanding. Shelby, how about you? What are you excited about trends in athletic training?
I think it's just booming right now. We are, I don't know if encroaching is the right word, but, we are really rooting down in different areas of public health. And it's very exciting because I think that's where we're going to find the opportunities of good pay, more people valuing our skills and, getting paid for what we're worth. We're just so versatile. And I don't think we are maximizing that versatility yet with the health system or, just making people feel better. We're the best pain management there is out there, basically, without having to have surgery. So it's, I think it's inspiring more athletic trainers to take hold of that and run with it and really inject ourselves into the public realm. So not that athletics is necessarily dead, but I do think, us being able to provide the range of return to functional ability is really underutilized. And so I'm excited to see what everybody's going to do in the next 5 years and where we're all going to end up.
All right. So this is To the Bone with Shelby Daly, ATC, a podcast conversation about all things athletic training. Now, today we were real pleased to have Andre Gonzalez. He is a DAT, ATC in the big world of athletic training. And he's been sharing with us about servant leadership concept for retention and making life better for ATs out there. Now, what do we got coming up on the bone there, Shelby?
Well, we got a website up and running, www.tothebonepodcast.com. We got Instagram, easy to find-ish. Still need to bump up those analytics. So go find it. And obviously LinkedIn, we have a page now, or you can follow my personal one at Shelby Daly.
Outstanding. Well, thanks everybody for being with us here on To the Bone, joining us and hopefully being part of the conversation. The whole point is to get put the information up there and then let everybody have a conversation so we can all figure out how to serve each other better, serve the athletic training community better, and obviously make better outcomes for our athletes.
That's it for today's episode of To the Bone. I hope we've sparked some new thoughts, challenged your perspectives, or simply reminded you to dig a little deeper. Remember, life isn't just about what's on the surface. Sometimes you've got to cut deeper and get to the bone of what really matters. To the Bone podcast is a product of Daly LLC. It's hosted and produced by Shelby Daly, ATC, and Randy Daly. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present. For more on the show, visit www.tothebonepodcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Get involved in the conversation. You can find us at www.tothebonepodcast.com. Drop us topic suggestions or be a potential guest. We're all about connecting with you, our listeners. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep cutting deep.